With so much exciting young talent coming into the league, it's hard to imagine anyone would miss opening day this season. Except those 4 guys, who are most likely going to miss opening day this season. Why? Well, in true baseball form, it's overly complicated to explain, but let's try anyway. The MLB season consists of 187 days. In order for a player to be considered as having played that season, they have to have 172 days of service time on a major league roster or the injured list. Anything less than 172 does not count, which, you know, sounds like no big deal, but it creates a nice little loophole that teams are more than happy to take advantage of.
So the White Sox are preparing for another highly anticipated major league debut roughly around the second week of April. That's because they're taking advantage of a service time rule that would keep Eloy Jimenez under their control through 2025.
If the Jays wait until mid-April to call up Vladdy, just so we're all on the same page, they get an extra year of control over him, which is important considering he's going to be really good.
See, after 6 years of service time, a player becomes eligible for free agency. And with the really good players, teams want to delay that as long as possible. So if a rookie spends 171 days on the roster and the other 15 in the minors, that means free agency is still 6 years away. The concept of service time wasn't always a bad thing. It originally came about thanks to Marvin Miller, the most important person you've probably never heard of, unless you've never heard of Bernadette Bryn, the visionary inventor of the hat wig. I think most of us always assumed that was a Guy Fieri joint. Miller was the executive director of the MLB Players Association, and he negotiated the league's first ever CBA. In 1974, he did away with baseball's reserve clause, that old rule that gave teams the right to any player's contract at the end of the season without input from the player, which meant that the only way to change teams was through a trade or by faking your own death and assuming a new identity, which is why everybody looked like they were wearing disguises back then. Getting rid of the reserve clause was great, but the result was that essentially every player could be a free agent all the time. And of course, when supply exceeds demand, value goes down. We all learned that in Econ 101 or any season of The Bachelor. So Miller, who was a player advocate, he wanted to drive up player salaries, he agreed to limit free agency to players with more than 6 years of service time. Thus concludes your history lesson. Vote that man into the Hall of Fame. Anyway, smash cut to today, it is now common practice for teams to manipulate player service time to their own benefit. We saw it with Ronald Acuna Jr. in the Braves, Cody Bellinger in the Dodgers, and perhaps most notably, Kris Bryant with the Cubs. Bryant had been named Minor League Player of the Year in 2014, then showed up at spring training the next season and hit .435 with 6 home runs. But still, everybody knew where he would be come opening day.
The Cubs are going to send him down at the end of spring training and let him sit there in the minor leagues in Iowa for 12, 13 days before they can call him up so they can obviously save the service time and they can have him for an extra year of control as far as free agency is concerned down the road.
Yeah, and wouldn't you know it, the Cubs called him up for exactly 171 days that season. It was so egregious that the Players Association actually filed a grievance on his behalf, but as far as I can tell from what I looked at on the internet, it's still pending. That is a 4-year-long grievance, or as most people call it, a relationship. Still, Bryant has continued to be vocal about his frustration with the service time loophole. He recently told The Athletic, quote, "It's awful, so awful. It's going to happen this year, and it happens every year. I could understand it if you go out and have a rough spring training where you don't look ready, but there's certain people who put the time and the effort into the offseason so that they prove that they're ready to go. I feel like you should be rewarded for that." And he has a very good point. Teams always seem to invoke merit when they're talking about why a player doesn't get something. But when players clearly have earned it, like Eloy Jimenez or Vladdy Jr., suddenly it's not about merit anymore. Other players have voiced their displeasure as well, like Astros pitcher Colin McHugh, who called out the White Sox after they announced that Jimenez would start the season in the minors, tweeting, "Wishing Eloy the best of luck as he goes to AAA to work on defense, base running, creating excess value for a $1.5 billion franchise that hasn't made the playoffs in a decade, bunting." Clearly, these guys are ready right now, but front offices have mastered the skill of coming up with random reasons why they need just a little bit more time in the minors.
I just don't see him as a major league player, right? He just pencil him in, it's done. He's 19.
We might have a thoroughbred on our hands here, but we're going to still develop him on the pace that we feel makes the most sense.
Look, I think he's a great talent. He has holes. I don't know what they are yet. I haven't seen them yet. But I know he has holes. I mean, he did strike out some in the minors and so on.
Oh, he struck out some in the minors? Yikes. He also, you know, he was the minor league leader in stolen bases, which, if I'm honest, really speaks to his lack of character. Those weren't your bases. Still, there are plenty of people who do not see this as a big deal.
Anyone who's saying, man, that fortnight at the beginning of the year where I don't get to see Vladdy Jr. and I'm robbed is ridiculous, because you get another year of control, and none of this might matter. If he is as good as advertised, they're going to probably want to re-sign him and lock him up well before we get to year 6 or year 7.
First of all, the only people sad about a fortnight during the baseball season are Carlos Santana's former teammates. Second of all, that argument that they might end up locking the guy up before he gets to see free agency anyway, it's a lot less convincing now than it used to be. Look at Dallas Keuchel. He's a 31-year-old Cy Young winner who reached free agency for the first time this offseason. And yet here we are, with the season started, and he's still unsigned. There's been a lot of talk this offseason about the sea change in economics across the league. Teams used to overspend on the biggest free agents on the market, which would balance out the below-market salaries players earned in their earlier years. But now, everyone's using advanced analytics, and that just does not bode well for older players. As Ryan Zimmerman of the Nationals told the Chicago Tribune last month, quote, "Because of analytics, the days when 30-year-olds get 7-year deals aren't going to happen very much anymore. I don't blame the teams for that. It's smart. But if owners are going to put so much value into the first part of people's careers, then future players should be compensated at the beginning of their career more than they are now." It seems like every team is trying to play Moneyball, even as the league is bringing in record revenues. Putting together a team of cheap young unknowns has become the baseball version of going gluten-free. Everybody's doing it, and let's be honest, most of you do not need to. The league has been changing over the last few years, and where we've ended up is this place where service time manipulation is that much harder to swallow. It feels worse now, especially when league and team-run media are using these young phenoms to gain interest in their product. You don't get to do that if you're not going to play them. There's a reason the Fast and the Furious trailers have The Rock in them, because he's in the movies. I should note that there are reports today that Eloy Jimenez and the White Sox may be close to a 6-year, $43 million deal, and if that happens, that's great. But it does not change that this is a problem for a lot of players around the league, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get better unless the players' union fights to make it better. And they've had chances in past CBA negotiations to close that loophole in service time, but for the most part, they were focused on more important things, like in 2017 when they negotiated for 2 seats each on the team bus traveling to and from spring training games. Which is like, you know, trading somebody your house for their Netflix password. But now, sources say that the MLBPA is intent on fixing this problem, which means things could get very interesting when the current agreement ends in 2021. A lot of people have tossed out solutions, and none of them are perfect, but they are worth considering. Stuff like counting service time in years instead of days, or granting every player free agency at a certain age. But I actually think that the league has a decent metric in the rule book that defines what a year of service should be for a major league player. It's just on a different page. According to MLB's own standards, you're considered a rookie after spending just 45 days on the active 25-man roster. That's it. After the next season, you are no longer eligible for Rookie of the Year awards, which means, as it currently stands, you could theoretically win Rookie of the Year without ever officially playing a year in the league. Wouldn't that be crazy?
Bryce Harper is the National League Rookie of the Year.
Houston Astros shortstop Carlos Correa is the winner of the 2015 Rookie of the Year award for the American League. Chicago Cubs third baseman Kris Bryant is the winner of the 2015 Rookie of the Year award for the National League.
The writers chose the Braves' Ronald Acuna Jr. is the National League winner of the Jackie Robinson Rookie of the Year award.
Huh. So, not crazy. Happens all the time. So either change the service time rules, or change the award to Rookie of the kind of almost year, but not really. The choice is yours.